Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
They called themselves a drinking club with a patriotism problem. A group of men gathering in a New York City bar, airing their grievances about the plight of the white male. They'd rail against feminism. They'd cheer USA. Their leader would read from Pat Buchanan's anti-immigration screed, The Death of the West. That same leader loudly and proudly identified as a Western chauvinist. In fact, once he formalized the group, he had recruits give this pledge as step one. I am a Western chauvinist and I refuse to apologize for helping to create the modern world. All of this happened against the backdrop of the 2016 presidential campaign. And in his podcast, the group's founder went even further, saying things like, I want violence, I want punching in the face. I'm disappointed in Trump supporters for not punching enough. Fighting solves everything. We need more violence from the Trump people. Members heeded that call, and they now number in the thousands. I'm talking about the Proud Boys, the far-right neo-fascistic group that promotes and engages in political violence, founded by former media executive Gavin McInnes. We've seen the Proud Boys almost everywhere in the last few years, from the deadly Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, to street brawls with demonstrators in Portland, Oregon, to school board meetings during the pandemic. And of course, they became a household name when then President Donald Trump gave this instruction to them in front of more than 70 million Americans during his first televised debate with Joe Biden.
Give me a
white
name.
supremacists and
white like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
So it's almost no surprise that members of the Proud Boys showed up at the January 6th insurrection, some flashing hand symbols made popular by white nationalists. Dozens of January 6 defendants are members of extremist groups like the Proud Boys. Just this month, the founder of Hawaii's Proud Boys chapter, who also founded an online group called Murder the Media, pleaded guilty to felony charges related to the Capitol riot. And former Proud Boy leader Enrique Tarrio is facing trial for seditious conspiracy charges related to January the 6th. It's only been since the insurrection that Americans have really fully recognized the true nature of the Proud Boys, their extremism, their misogyny, their racism, their violence. But before that, the Proud Boys were so good at hiding behind their "we're a rowdy drinking club" shtick, so good at using that to dodge media coverage and law enforcement scrutiny, despite their numerous violent acts, that after January the 6th, one former Homeland Security official told the New York Times the Proud Boys were perceived as just the guys that drink too much after the football game and tend to get into bar fights type of people that never looked organized enough to cause serious national security threats. Still, one journalist recognized the dangerous threat the Proud Boys posed before most others. HuffPost's Andy Campbell has been following the group since 2016, and he's now written the new book, We Are Proud Boys: How a Right-Wing Street Gang Ushered in a New Era of American Extremism. Campbell writes, Gavin McInnes built an incredibly strong and resilient political monster and unleashed it on the world during a golden era for political monsters. He didn't just build a gang, he built a worldview for a generation of violent men. HuffPost senior editor and author of the new book, We Are Proud Boys, Andy Campbell, joins me now. Andy, thanks so much for coming on the show. You recount in the book the numerous instances of violence committed by the Proud Boys. Why did it take the insurrection for law enforcement in America to take them seriously?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Mehdi. And you know, it's taken a long time for law enforcement and the media to get on board with this, you know, act of political violence that they've been parading throughout the country over the years. And really, the Proud Boys have positioned what they do as politically protected speech. You know, they are positioning violence as constitutionally protected by latching on to the GOP.
So, question, Andy. Is this a white supremacist group? Because there's a debate around that. They would say they're not. They say, hey, oh, look at our leader, former leader, Enrique Tarrio, who is Afro-Cuban descent, excuse me. They would say, we're not a white supremacist group. What's your evaluation, having written the book?
Well, certainly their rule set is full of bigotry and white supremacist beliefs. I mean, they're super anti-immigrant. They hate people from outside of the country, and they have Nazis within their group. I mean, they certainly have white supremacist elements. But you know, they have, again, using that Cuban American as their leader, they sort of use that as a front to say, hey, we're not white nationalists, we're not white supremacists, and that's helped them again position that violence as something that should be defended. And they've used it to teach average Americans that, hey, we're out here for you. We're out here for politics. We're not out here to fight, when, of course, that's not true.
Enrique Tarrio is facing seditious conspiracy charges related to the insurrection. He has a close relationship with Trump ally Roger Stone. You got an exclusive interview with Stone for the book. And while he does at times try to deflect on the nature of his relationship with the Proud Boys, Stone admits that he has been advising Tarrio and the Proud Boys for years, giving his, quote, professional and personal input on their political goals, and on several occasions gave them advice when they got into legal trouble or did something that was bad for their optics. Did you get a sense of why this relationship developed? I mean, we understand what Tarrio is looking for, but what's in it for a Stone?
Right. And I asked Stone directly, like, what do you get out of this relationship? Because, of course, Tarrio wants to get involved with Roger Stone and Trump allies. That's how they became what they are. But for Stone, really, I think he's just friends with the guy. This Stone loves to have attention himself. He loves to have, you know, Trump supporting Americans on his side. And he really has taken Enrique Tarrio and the Proud Boys under his wing, has advised them, like you said, on multiple crimes, and has advised Tarrio as he tried to make the Proud Boys a more political monster. And certainly Tarrio credits him with helping to teach other Proud Boys how to get involved politically. Now a bunch of them are running for office and throwing their, you know, support behind their candidates.
And if we're playing Kevin Bacon's 6 Degrees, that puts them, what, 2 degrees away from Trump, Tarrio from Trump. You got Roger Stone in the middle. It's not a great distance from the leader of the Proud Boys to the president of the United States at the time.
Absolutely. And so when he said stand back and stand by, I mean, we extremism reporters saw that as a really close call.
So, Andy, we're seeing Proud Boys not just showing up at school boards now, but running to become members of office, running for elected office. They're even managing to take over the boards of some Republican local and state committees. For example, the Miami-Dade Republican Executive Committee, I believe, was infiltrated by Proud Boys. How much of a threat is that, especially in terms of our politics? What is the relationship between the GOP and the Proud Boys?
Well, not only do they have friendships with people like Roger Stone, but they're trying to take over offices big and small. Enrique Tarrio told me between his jail stints while I was writing the book that he wanted them to run for the smallest offices possible, you know, encourage local politics, put their support behind candidates that are like-minded, and they've done that. And even though Tarrio sits behind, you know, jail bars waiting for sedition charges, this political monster is running as it should be. And so now they have people running for school boards across the country. They have guys on, like you said, the Miami-Dade Republican Executive Committee, who are trying to encourage local politics at the local level. And that may become bigger, but for now, they're showing that they have that political savvy.
But is there a knowing relationship between members of the Republican Party, elected officials, senior officials, and the Proud Boys? Or are the GOP saying, no, we have a wall, we're completely, we keep them up, we're not letting them near us out of choice? Because, if you're going to have a debate about whether there's fascism in America, always the argument was, well, where are the street gangs? Where's the armed militia on behalf of the political party? Is this the GOP's militia?
Absolutely, and they see themselves as the enforcement arm of the GOP. But the GOP has not rebuffed them. There is no amount of, whoa, we're not involved with these guys. Certainly, there are GOP officials who still embrace them following January 6th. Congressional candidate and Trump-endorsed candidate Joe Kent in Washington State, for example, donated $11,000 to a Proud Boy for consulting fees. We don't really know too much about that yet, but there are candidates across the country who are involved with the Proud Boys.
Can only imagine what kind of consulting he was offering. Final question, Andy. You interviewed several current and past members of the Proud Boys for this book, and some of them, I believe, said things to you that were vaguely threatening. Do you ever worry for your own safety in reporting on a group like the Proud Boys on extremism in general, or your wife's safety, who's also a reporter on the extremism beat?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I haven't gotten too many threats, but the Gavin McInnes and company recently congratulated me on my marriage to my wife, who is an extremism reporter herself. And of course, that was a veiled threat. Whenever these guys can, find a woman or a person of color attached to something, they know that they can insert a threat, and they've tried to do that. But it's a conversation we're having, and I think we feel safe for now.
It is Tuesday, the 20th of September of 2022. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Though I should mention that if Hungary keeps it up, we're just going to have to promote the Spanish paprika, which I have to say is just as fine and of high quality as the Hungarian paprika. Though the Spanish paprika is a bit more expensive because there's less of it, but their production of paprika in Spain has increased dramatically because of, well, shall we say, Hungary's hunger for independence of the EU. I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe they want to go back to the 13th century. Maybe. Anyway, we have our own issues with modernity here in the United States. I love how the Proud Boys, with their Western chauvinism, are supposed to be hearkening in a new modernity. Yeah, a new modernity that seems like the old ancient misogyny of years from yore. That's right. Which reminds me, Talk Like a Pirate Day. With the Queen dead, shouldn't they be honoring Talk Like a Privateer Day? Yeah, that's what I think. Small, thin line between pirate and privateer. Maybe that's what Trump thought he was. Just a privateer. He had deputized himself to pretty much steal all the state secrets of the United States so he could, well, I don't know, negotiate them on the black market as he travels from port to port. Aye, matey. Okay. And he's all pissed off because apparently the FBI agents didn't take off their shoes when they entered his room. I think that's going to play really well in dumb fuck Americanistan. Take off your shoes. They don't take off their shoes when they go to bed. Give me a break. Anyway, doesn't anybody clean up Mar-a-Lago? That was like 6 weeks ago when they searched his place, and he calls a raid. ransacked my house. It's not a house, it's a compound. It's a resort. And you were taking terrible care of it, buddy. Which gets me back to the point. 6 weeks ago, they had the search. And now he's complaining that they left a mess? Who cleans your place? Maybe he got back earlier than the staff anticipated. Because he could have come a lot earlier, but it was just so ungodly hot, wasn't it? Nobody of any substance stays in Florida during that time of year. They hightail it out to cooler climes, less humidity. And he couldn't find it within himself to go and find out what the hell went on at his supposed house. Give me a break. And I'll get back to this. Emily Post of, Post, the food conglomerate, General Foods. She built Mar-a-Lago. And it looked pretty darn good. It looks like it's falling apart. What is wrong with this guy? I'll tell you what's wrong. He's not getting the kind of Russian money he was expecting he'd be getting. Though I did see that the nukes that traitor Michael Flynn was negotiating are going to be built in Russia. And he's out there talking about overthrowing the United States of America and making money off of it. Well, so is Trump. They're all in cahoots. All right. So is Trump getting any money for that nuke deal with Russia? Is that why he stole our nuke secrets? Because it wasn't just about capabilities of adversaries and allies alike. Yep. That's what they fried the Rosenbergs over on the electric chair. Just saying, a lot less. The Rosenbergs were fried for a lot less. But I guess this is just an example of how we've advanced as a society, isn't it? All right. So right-wing extremism, specifically in Florida, has increased dramatically since DeSantis, the pocket Mussolini. Guy's a little wimp. I know, once again, the camera angles make that guy look pretty big and buff. But he's not. He's a munchkin. Not that there's anything wrong with being a munchkin. But this guy's a Nazi munchkin. Master race my ass. So yeah, because DeSantis will not talk ill of any right-wing Nazi fascist in Florida, they are growing exponentially. All right. Which brings us here to Southern Oregon because, boy, I don't know why I go on Nextdoor. I have a house account that is kind of like where I post pictures of the house on occasion. But I get, and also my mom's Ancestry.com kind of thing is, I put it up there so that we would have something just for the house. But anyway, I get Nextdoor emails there or announcements, notifications. And there was one there that from a guy who said that, 88 million of us voted for Harrison Biden. And if there's an issue about, housing these immigrants, and actually they're asylum seekers, but also immigrants, we have no problem. And of course, that caused an uproar here in Southern Oregon. The sundown towns of Southern Oregon, as I refer to the area. And it was actually kind of sick because these people have no idea what immigration is. Everything is couched in racism that they deny that they are partaking in, of course. And at the same time, they're calling us commie baby eaters. And then I get an announcement or a warning from Nextdoor because I said, typical bigoted racist BS. But what do you expect from the typical bigoted racist here in Sundown Towns, Southern Oregon? So I get a notification from Nextdoor that maybe I should tone it down a little bit. when there's this rampant racism expressed in the most overt terms, and I'm responding to it with BS? Please. I see where it's going. That's right. They deplatform you, they marginalize you, or maybe they marginalize you, then they deplatform you. You gotta get this sequence correct. And the next thing you know, they're not even knocking on your door. They're just going ahead and firebombing the whole thing with you in it. That's how they work. We got a guy from Grants Pass who just pled guilty to driving up to Portland to break windows at the Planned Parenthood there and terrorize the area and the staff. And of course, just so you know, Grants Pass is just sort of like the next town over from Rogue River. And he had already been part of the effort from the salt shaker Christian heretics that harass everybody at the farmer's market. He'd already taken part in vandalizing the Planned Parenthood in Grants Pass. Some people consider him to be a hero. And, of course, if you express the fact that the guy's a terrorist, that's a step too far, apparently. Okay, well, he's a Nazi, crystal fascist mofo, 27 years old. All I kept hearing is this, don't worry, Obama got elected. Everybody young is going to be liberal. Don't worry, it'll be by attrition. No. There's more Nazi Jungen goose-stepping around now than I've ever seen in my life. 67 years of it. Just saying. Been around for a while. I traveled every single state of these great United States, including Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, etc., even Guam. I've never seen this much goose-stepping Nazi Jungen stiff-arming their way through life. Bringing a new modernity, yeah, I guess. Sounds like the great pogroms of old to me, but they don't even know what a pogrom is. They can't spell it. Well, you know what they say. Democracy dies in a book deal. Okay, I've touched all bases. Pretty much all bases. Oh, the Queen is finally dead. Okay, so we can move on now? Can we speak about these nuke secrets that Trump's still trying to hide from the special master? I love that part, too. I guess I haven't touched all bases. Trump gets his special master, and the special master says, well, I've got to see arguments from both sides. And Trump says, what? You're not doing what I want. You want to hear their side, too? What do you think this is, America? And Deary said, yeah, this is effing America, mofo. You think I'm pissed off about Carter Page and FISA? Carter Page is a Russian asset. Everybody knows that. Don't need to gin up an email for it. Jeez. Okay, well, I guess Trump guessed wrong, unless they have something on Deary. And apparently right now, I don't think they do. Does Cannon have authority over Deary? Can she replace him with that Huck guy whose wife sits on the 11th Circuit, who will not recuse herself if she's part of the 3-judge panel? You know that. No repug maggot ever recuses himself if they're a judge. We always do. We kick out our senators for what they did as a comedian before they were ever a senator, decades before they were a senator. We kick them out. Oh, you made a joke about grabbing a starlet's breasts. Oh, that's so terrible. We can't have you as our senator. Right after he took the Trump administration to task. Al Franken caused so much pointedness in his questioning when he sat on committees. They got rid of him, and we helped. Compare that to what's going on. And the abject misogyny, racism, sexism, violence. Oh, wow. Al did something as a comedian long ago. And even the starlet said, I didn't know what I was roped into when I said that I was upset about him doing that, was she? They did the same act on stage all the time. Give me a break. What do you have starlets at a USO show for anyway? There's a long history of that. And anyway, once again, about a decade, almost 2 decades before he became a senator. And we're allowing people who are stealing nuke secrets right now going around giving hate rallies and the stiff arm, one finger salute. I'm not talking about flipping people off. I'm talking about where goes one, we go all. All right. Okay, I better get into our curated part of the show. I really do. I'm sorry. I had to go off. All right, I already spoke about the Proud Boys, and on the rest of the menu, House Democrats are voting this week to overhaul the 19th century Electoral Count Act. And they say it's bipartisan, but you know, the Republicans can only win if they can manipulate the Electoral College. And, of course, this is their strongest legislative response yet to the January 6th Capitol insurrection, that being the Dems. Damage assessments have begun in flooded remote Alaska villages, and a parts shortage has forced Ford to cut its third-quarter earnings forecast. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where South Korean prosecutors asked Interpol to issue a fugitive alert for the founder of Terraform Labs after the $40 billion crash of the firm's cryptocurrency. Or you could call it a Ponzi scheme. And Prime Minister Liz Truss dashed any hopes for Brexiteers with an admission that a UK-US free trade deal is not going to happen for years. I guess we're not going to buy them out, are we? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link there at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And thank you to those of you out there helping us pay our bills. If those of you out there who don't know, if you could send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that helps us pay those bills I just mentioned, and they keep increasing. They never go down. But that help of assistance of allowing us to pay those bills then allows us to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting dark forces arrayed against representative democracy, not only in the great United States, but around the world. And we've been doing that for 11 years because of your generosity, and thank you, thank you, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coast 10 minutes before showtime, so you can find those show notes and links by going to my Twitter feed and the profile page even, and they'll take you to my page on Daily Coast, and you can find all the show notes and links, not only for West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but also for the Justice Department. Yeah, my Justice Department. There you go. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, we better get into this first offering here we have in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's by Mary Claire Jalonik out of the Associated Press. House Democrats are voting this week on changes to a 19th century law for certifying presidential elections, their strongest legislative response yet to the January 6th Capitol insurrection and Trump's efforts to overturn his 2020 election defeat. The vote to overhaul the Electoral Count Act, expected tomorrow, Wednesday, comes as a bipartisan group of senators is moving forward with a similar bill. Lawmakers in both parties have said they want to change the arcane law before it is challenged again. Trump and his allies tried to exploit the law's vague language in the weeks after the election as they strategized how they could keep Joe Biden out of office, including by lobbying Vice President Mike Pence to simply object to the certification of Biden's victory when Congress counted the votes on January 6. Now, of course, we all know Pence refused to do so, but it was clear afterward that there was no real legal framework or recourse to respond under the 1887 law if the vice president had tried to block the count. The House and Senate bills would better define the vice president's ministerial role and make clear that he or she has no say in the final outcome. Now, both versions would also make it harder for lawmakers to object if they don't like the results of an election, clarify laws that could allow a state's vote to be delayed, and ensure that there is only one slate of legal electors from each state. One strategy by Trump and his allies was to create alternate slates of electors in key states that Biden won, with the ultimately unsuccessful idea that they could be voted on during the congressional certification on January 6, and the result in throwing the election back to Trump. The bills are a response to the violence that day when a mob of Trump supporters pushed past police, broke into the building, and interrupted Biden's certification. The crowd was echoing Trump's false claims of widespread voter fraud and calling for Pence's death after it became clear that he would not try to overturn the election. Mark Thiessen of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Authorities in Alaska were making contact with some of the most remote villages in the United States to determine their food and water needs, as well as assess the damage after a massive storm flooded communities on the state's vast western coast over the weekend. No one was reported injured or killed during the massive storm, the remnants of Typhoon Merbok, as it traveled north through the Bering Strait over the weekend. However, damage to homes, roads, and other infrastructure is only starting to be revealed as the floodwaters recede. About 21,000 residents living in the small communities dotting a 1,000-mile stretch of Alaska's western coastline, a distance longer than the entire length of the California coast, were impacted by the storm. The state transportation department said most airports in the area were open, and officials were making either temporary or permanent repairs to the runways that still have issues. staff at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A parts shortage that has thousands of Ford's most profitable vehicles sitting on lots, waiting to be fully assembled, has forced the automaker to slash its third quarter earnings forecast. Ford said yesterday, Monday, that it expects to have 40,000 to 45,000 unfinished vehicles on its hands when the quarter ends on September 30th. Most of those are SUVs and popular truck models, which are some of Ford's biggest moneymakers. The company, based in Dearborn, Michigan, now expects its third quarter earnings before interest and taxes to be between $1.4 billion and $1.7 billion. It reported adjusted earnings before interest and taxes of $3.7 billion in the second quarter. Its stock fell almost 5% in after-hours trading late yesterday, Monday. Well, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. When you think of pollinators, what comes to mind? Bees, butterflies, maybe hummingbirds? Well, how about flies?
Flies in general are the second most important group of pollinating insects. So I think that they deserve more credit than they often get.
C. Scott Clem is an insect ecologist at the University of Georgia, and he's been studying a type of fly known as a hoverfly. You may have actually seen them before, masquerading as bees and wasps.
They tend to be yellow and black colored, and they're kind of different from other flies in that regard. They're these little insects that you often find visiting flowers, or sometimes they'll actually land on your skin, seeking the salt on your skin.
By studying isotopes in the insect's legs and wings, Clem and his colleagues have now determined that some of these flies make a remarkable autumn migration. They seem to originate near Ontario, Canada, and then they fly hundreds of miles south to central Illinois. And it's possible that some go even further, thousands of miles perhaps.
They get up in high altitude air currents. They're able to just surf on these winds, basically, and it takes them these vast distances.
The results appear in the journal Ecological Monographs. As for why the flies migrate, well, Clem says they might be pursuing the aphids they eat southward, or maybe they're following the blooms of nectar-rich flowers.
And if they're moving, they could be moving these ecological services across the continent on an annual basis.
The scientists write that the flies could be transporting billions of grains of pollen across the continent, all while working to exterminate pests. So even if hoverflies' bee-like appearance is mere mimicry, the ecological services they provide could very well be the real deal. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. They say that lions are the king of the jungle. But a recent study shows that a single spritz of oxytocin, a hormone known to promote social bonding, renders even the most ornery alpha a total pussycat. The findings appear in the journal iScience.
Oh, the greatest thing about watching lions is that lions are so openly and extravagantly affectionate with each other.
Craig Packer, director of the Lion Center at the University of Minnesota. He's been traveling to the Serengeti since the 1970s to study the social behavior of these big cats.
They just rub each other with their foreheads. Their chins are just in each other's faces. I mean, they're just really into each other. And then when they calm down and it's time to go back to sleep, one will flop down and another will flop on top of it. So it's very endearing.
I've always loved lions.
Jessica Burkhart is a grad student in Packer's Pack.
But what is it about lions that is so different than their closest relative, the leopard, and then their next closest, the tiger, who are completely solitary?
And the first thing that came to mind was oxytocin.
They call oxytocin the love hormone, but that sounds like love potion number 9. I prefer to think of it as the affection hormone. If you have a nice warm hug, that burst of feeling you get, that's oxytocin. And so the lions would be like a perfect example of a species that you want to try to see what you could do with the oxytocin.
They conducted the study at a wildlife sanctuary in South Africa, where their first challenge was figuring out how to get the hormone into the lions.
Jessica surprised me with this perfume sprayer, which I just thought was so ingenious, and it worked out really, really well.
It's like a little glass bottle with a long tip, and then there's a bulb. So I have to pump the bulb, and then the tip is about 6 inches long.
Burkhart would lure a lion over to the enclosure fence by waving a tasty hunk of meat.
Once I hold that meat and the animal's grabbing it, I can kind of just stick it in the fence into their nostril and spray away.
The cats put up with the nasal invasion as long as they got their grub. But if Burkhart spritzed a lion after the meat was gone...
You should see their faces. They go, huh? Like, how dare you take a cheap shot on me? They take it personally. Oh, it's so funny.
The researchers then assessed oxytocin's effects in several different behavioral situations. The first was seeing whether the hormone would make a lion less territorial when it comes to a desirable toy or a snack. Normally, lions are pretty protective of their possessions, particularly those that can be eaten.
They'll growl and they'll snarl and they smack and they scratch and they snap. So a lot of times you will just get this sort of reactive behavior where they're going to just kind of lash out to be like, get off.
When it came to the toys, oxytocin did help to curb that reactive behavior, allowing other lions to come much closer. But it didn't do much for their monopolistic attitude toward meals, which Burkhart says was not entirely unexpected.
With the toy, you're playful, you might be more inclined to having your partners play with you. When you have a food object, it's a much more primal instinct. So with the food trial, it's that, innate desire to survive that causes this very reactive aggression.
Seeing that oxytocin suppressed aggression in one situation, but not the other, actually reassured the researchers that the hormone wasn't just making the lions totally dopey.
It doesn't, make your brain completely different, but it's like drinking your coffee in the morning.
If you're a testosterone-fueled grumpy Gus, it could render you almost delightfully demure.
Oh my gosh, within minutes of the oxytocin, that guy was completely chilled out. And I mean, when we were giving him his oxytocin, he was growling, smacking the fence, totally insane, testosterone brain, and then he just completely mellowed out.
But even more dramatic was the third test, in which the researchers played an audio recording of an unfamiliar lion's roar. Which can be as unnerving as it sounds.
That's like having a stranger in your bedroom saying, I own this place, right?
Now, in the control conditions, in which lions got spritzed with a simple saline solution, about half of them roared in return, maybe 50 or 60 times.
That's about right. So half of the lions are going to actually roar, and the other half are going to be looking, probably standing behind the guy who's roaring, and just looking and watching.
But when the lions were dosed with oxytocin,
there were zero. I mean, zero. They completely did not roar. That was astounding. You could just see this difference in demeanor. So they just laid there and they looked, they turned their heads, they were curious and they watched, but they're not getting up, puffing up, scent marking and roaring.
With the oxytocin, it's like, strangers, no big deal. And in some cases, it just seemed like, well, they're more interested in head rubbing with each other rather than worrying about the stranger.
The results give the team hope that oxytocin could provide a more effective way to introduce new lions into sanctuaries or reserves.
Because getting animals to become used to and accept strangers in their midst is an enormous challenge.
And that would be a big boost for conservation efforts.
And very key to using oxytocin to actually make a difference in the world.
A world with more tolerance and less roaring. Sounds darn near perfect. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
So lions will do these sequences where they're like, roar, roar, and then they do grunts.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Are more books being banned, and which ones? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. According to a new report from the American Library Association, there has been, across the country, a marked escalation in the efforts to ban books. Some libraries have been threatened with loss of funding if they didn't remove certain titles. Some librarians have been accused of distributing graphic pornography, and police reports have been filed based on the books on the shelves. Most of the attacks focus on books with LGBTQ or black characters. Maya Kobe's memoir, Genderqueer, appears to be one of, if not the, most frequently targeted books in the country. The New York Times quotes the Library Association's director of the Office of Intellectual Freedom as saying, quote, "We're truly fearful that at some point we'll see a librarian arrested for providing constitutionally protected books on disfavored topics," which is a testament to this profoundly sad and highly dangerous state of affairs. Public libraries must be able to remain true to their mission. As President Dwight Eisenhower said, "The libraries of America are and must ever remain the home of free and inquiring minds. Everyone is entitled to the clear confidence that there they can freely seek the whole truth, unvarnished by fashion and uncompromised by expediency." Or as President John Kennedy put it, libraries should be open to all, except the censor. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1878. That was the day that socialist author Upton Sinclair was born in Baltimore, Maryland. A prolific writer, Sinclair wrote nearly 100 books and other publications. Upton Sinclair's father and father's relatives had been wealthy Southerners, but thanks to the Civil War and its aftermath, the family was left in financial ruins. His mother was from a wealthy Episcopalian family and was very strict. Sinclair often stayed with her wealthy parents. These family experiences growing up gave Sinclair an insight into how both the rich and poor lived. Sinclair studied at the City College of New York and for a time at Columbia University. He went on to write several popular novels that explored the experiences of working people in the rapidly industrializing United States. The Flyver King explored the impact of Henry Ford on auto production. Oil focused on the oil industry in Southern California. But Sinclair is best remembered for his classic expose of the Chicago meatpacking industry, The Jungle. The book was fiction, but based in fact. In 1904, he spent 7 weeks working undercover in Chicago's meatpacking plants to get material for the book. The Jungle was published in 1906 and was immediately a bestseller. It was originally published in serial form in a socialist newspaper. Sinclair said that he wrote the novel intending to set forth the breaking of human hearts by a system which exploits the labor of men and women for profit. The novel led to congressional legislation and federal regulation of the meatpacking industry. It helped lead to the passage of the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only in the mid-70s. We have made the turn in the seasons, folks. Looks like we will have mostly cloudy today with showers in the afternoon. Had a bit of rain overnight, enough to puddle. And when I say puddling, I mean it's puddled. And we will also have winds out of the west northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then showers this evening. Scattered thunderstorms developing overnight. Lows in the mid-50s. Winds light and variable. And the day totals with the overnight totals looks like it will add up to about a quarter of an inch. And then tomorrow we will have light rain early, remaining cloudy with showers in the afternoon. And we have a forecast of something a little less than a quarter inch, but still quite a bit of rain. Highs tomorrow will be in the upper 60s. Ragweed pollen is the predominant pollen causing problems to people who have those problems right here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region, though, is good at 29 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is in the moderate range, as it should be during the fall, at level 5. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.93 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 66 and partly cloudy. Paris is 64 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 76 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 51 with a light rain shower. Kabul is 66 and clear. Hong Kong is 83 and fair. Tokyo is 65 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 62 and partly cloudy. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kim Tong Wong of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here in the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. South Korean prosecutors have asked Interpol to issue a fugitive alert for the founder of Terraform Labs as they investigate a $40 billion crash of the firm's cryptocurrency that devastated retail investors around the world. The Seoul Southern District Prosecutor's Office asked Interpol to circulate the red notice for Do Kwon across the agency's 195 member nations to find and apprehend him. A South Korean court recently issued arrest warrants for Kwon and 5 other people connected to Terraform Labs as prosecutors investigate allegations of fraud and financial crimes in relation to the implosion of its digital currencies in May. Interpol had not publicized the red notice for Kwon on its website as of this morning, and South Korean prosecutors say the designation may take more than a week. Interpol describes such notices as requests to law enforcement worldwide to locate and provisionally arrest fugitives pending extradition, surrender, or similar legal action.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Jill Lawless of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Prime Minister Liz Truss has kicked off her first visit to the U.S. as Britain's leader with an admission that a UK-U.S. free trade deal is not going to happen for years. Truss said a transatlantic deal is not one of her priorities, a sharp contrast with the stance of her immediate predecessors as Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Theresa May. Both dangle the promise of a deal with the world's biggest economy as one of the main prizes of Britain's exit from the European Union. There aren't currently any negotiations taking place with the U.S., and I don't have an expectation that those are going to start in the short to medium term, Truss told reporters aboard her plane to New York, where she landed today to attend the UN General Assembly. Truss said she was more focused on obtaining accession to the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership and striking trade deals with India and the Gulf Cooperation Council of States, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Those are our trade priorities, she said. Truss's downbeat assessment about transatlantic trade came ahead of her first one-on meeting with President Joe Biden since she took office 2 weeks ago. The two leaders are due to meet tomorrow, Wednesday, on the sidelines of the UN gathering in New York. Truss said her priorities for the meeting with Biden were making sure that we are able to collectively deal with Russian aggression and ensuring we are not strategically dependent on authoritarian regimes. I want to work with our allies like the United States, like France, the EU, the Baltic states, Poland, to take on the challenge we face from Russian aggression, she said. That should be our priority. That puts the UK broadly in line with Biden's tough stance towards Russia and China, but the trade impasse leaves the often touted special relationship between Britain and the US on the back burner. Supporters of Brexit say one of the chief benefits of leaving the bloc and its vast free market of almost 500 million people was a chance for the United Kingdom to make new trade deals around the world. UK-US trade talks were launched with fanfare soon after Britain left the EU in 2020, But negotiations faltered amid rising concern in the U.S. administration about the impact of Brexit, especially on Northern Ireland. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.